have a list of sections for a particular course. If we go back, notice that section 2 doesn't have any courses, any sections, right? So if I go enroll here, course 1 doesn't have any sections. So we would call this maybe section 1.1, and it has 12 seats. And we can refresh, and I can create maybe section 1.2, has 23 seats. Ideally, these would render right away, right? I would create and then render, and that's okay. What we could do is that in the component, when we add, right, when we create a new section, we could listen for that then, right? And in that then, this would come back with the section that was just created, but there's nothing for us to do with that section, right? There's no point in doing anything with it. What we could do is that we could call load sections again, right? And load sections would go and fetch, would come and fetch that. We could call this dot load sections. Now load sections is expecting the course ID, so I'm going to pass it to it anyway. Ideally, you would put this here, perhaps in a separate function that could be reused from anywhere. Right? It happens to be called at the load time, and also called whenever we create a brand new one. Right? Right, so if I create here section 1.3 with 32, right now it adds it right away. Right? Notice that if I go to a different section, I forget which one was it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was it? No, not this one. I think it was number 5. Didn't we create one for 5? Yeah. So notice that it displays different sections for different courses. Right. So our filter is working. All right, so let's play around with enrollment. Enrollment, this will be a up to this point, we've created lots of one-to-many. One course, many sections. One course, many sections. How about a many-to-many? Right? We'd like to be able to say, well, in one section, you can have many students enroll in that one section, but that also the student can be enrolled. An enrollment says this student is enrolled in many sections, and one section can have many students enrolled in that section, right? So let's see how we can implement that. Now there's several ways of implementing many-to-many. So on the Node.js, there's a couple ways of doing it. So let's look at the data model. What options do we have? So let's create here a directory. We can do an enrollment. And let's look at the schema. What schema could we use? So this would be enrollment dot schema dot server.js. And certainly we'll need Mongoose. And we'll have to create a schema for this. So this will be enrollment schema, and this will be mongoose dot schema. So the most trivial way of doing it is doing it the classical way, the way you do it in a relational database. Right? In a relational database, what you do is that you have foreign keys, where you have here the section ID, and this might be the section ID is a string because it's a object ID, and the other one is the student ID, also string. And now these would behave as foreign keys. This basically says, hey, that student over there is enrolled in that section. Okay, and I can have any combination of student and section. Okay, so this is the most basic way of implementing it, and certainly Mongo allows you to do this, which is perfectly fine. Mongo allows you to do it another way. right? Another way might be as follows. In section, you could say students. And now this would be an array of students. The IDs of the students that they, and as strings. And now I have an array of object IDs, right, of all the students who are enrolled in this section. Right? So that's certainly an option. And the other case would be that the user, if this would being a student perhaps, would have a list here of sections, of IDs of sections that they enrolled in. Okay? So now the UML diagram where you have a many-to-many, and they truly have star on each side, right? You have a student star, right, where the cardinality is many, and on the sections is also many, right? That typically in a relational database, if you've seen this in 5200 or database, you typically have to reify that. You have to convert that in something that can be converted into a concrete class or a concrete table, right? The concrete table would be this enrollment table, this enrollment collection. Right, this is the classical way of doing it. Right? You have an additional collection or additional table that has foreign keys to the other two entities. That's a classical way. Right? And in relational databases, this is the only way that you could do it. You have to have a mapping table in between that points to both of them. It's the only way. Right? But MongoDB, because MongoDB allows you to have arrays, right? Arrays as a data type as part of the schema, right? You could implement it without the mapping table, with the enrollment table. Right? Instead, a section would have all the IDs of the student that are enrolled in this section. Right? And then on the student side, it would have an array of a list of IDs of all the sections that this student is enrolled in. You see that? Right? There's no need to reify. There's no need to for this additional this additional class. Right? And now there's some reasons why you would go one way or another. Okay? One of the problems of doing it this way, of having arrays, is that you would have to maintain two arrays. Say a student drops out of a section. Right? Well, you need to update their array of saying that they're no longer in that section. But you also have to update the sections array, that that student is no longer in that section. You see that? Right? That's a complication. And you are responsible for doing that, for updating both. Also, if I want to be able to see a list of enrollments, typically I would like to have that already stored in either in a view or in a table or collection that already shows me all the enrollments, independent of the students, independent of the sections. I just want to see just a list of all the enrollments. If that's the case, then I would prefer something like this, where I have all the enrollments in all the sections in one single collection. Otherwise, I would have to iterate over all the sections and fetch all the students from those sections, right? And then generate that view. So it depends. It depends what use cases you have. Yes?
Is there no recursion in the
No, there isn't. You can navigate from one to the other, but there is no recursion. No, MongoDB actually allows you to navigate down to a certain level, and you can put placeholders like wildcards, like for all the array elements that are in a particular array. But it has its limitations. You can only go in so far, so many levels deep down. So I think you can't go more than 2 levels down in a recursive array that goes in. Yeah. So you would end up having to implement that at application level, right? All that recursion would have to happen on the. Typically, you do it through maps and reducers. That typically you've seen that in other courses. Anyway, so we're going to go with the classical way. What we can do here is that instead of enrollments, right, we're going to, instead of an ID, although that's what's going to be stored here, an ID. The ID of the section and the ID of the students. Okay? But I'm not going to be data type strings. Instead, they're going to be type, what was it? Mongoose.schema.types.object ID. There we go. Okay. So it's going to be referencing another collection, all right? And you need to specify what are you referring to. You say ref and the actual collection that you're referring to, the model that you're referring to. And we already gave it a unique identifier. For section, we called it section model. This is so that it knows that this ID is referring to an object of that type. Okay? And same thing for here will be type mongoose.schema.types.object ID. And this will be referring to a user model. Okay, this is equivalent of in SQL doing a foreign key that references a particular table, a particular field in that table. That typically would be a primary key, and that's exactly what this is doing, right? It says I'm going to store here that primary key, right? And you're going to use it as a foreign key, right? That will allow you to go fetch that other object. Okay. Okay. So now that we have that, other things that you might have here are, a grade that you got in that particular section. Yes?
Does the ref should contain the exact name of the table or like the schema or the section model?
No, the model. The model. The name of the model that you referenced. When you created the model, you gave it a name. That unique identifier. Yeah. Right. That will allow you, later on we'll see, it will allow you to do a pseudo join, right? That we'll say, okay, I want to show all the enrollments, and IDs are not going to be any good to me, right? I'll just have IDs everywhere. Ideally, I would like to be able to see sections and then the names of the students. And it says, okay, I can see that in these sections, these students are enrolled, right? So that will be helpful to me, to what sections and what students. Other things that I might put in here are the grade that they got. Right, A minus, or whatever would be stored here. And we would export this. So we'd say we could say module that exports the enrollment schema. Once we export this, we can start working on the model, right? And we'll do that tomorrow.